Before Dracula, there was Nosferatu. Both characters originate from Bram Stoker's novel, but in Germany during the 20s, adaptation rights weren't as strict as they were in Hollywood. The story was a loose translation of the book and the first to appear on the big screen. The style of horror, however, is far different from the later version by Universal, and pretty much every other version since. This was not the safe, sensitized bubble meant for American audiences. This was a country that pushed experimentation and the grotesque. Madness was an aesthetic. Harsh lines and heavy shadows a world of their own, an inner world. Karl Mayer, who became famous for co-writing Dr. Caligari, would go on to work with F.W. Murnau. Their collaboration would become one of the great writer-director partnerships of that time. Nosferatu was not one of those collaborations, but, as we'll see, Murnau's mastery of the camera, of light and shadow, of cutting and design, make this film what it is today. One of the most important horror films ever made. Some moments are still shocking. We may know the story by heart, but the reason Murnau's film has stood the test of time is not because of its plot, but because of how deeply some of those images remain buried in our consciousness long after they've been seen. Why is that? I think it might have to do with a couple of things. For one, the editing. Cuts are often harsh. Knowing how particular Murnau was about every element in his films, this is no accident. When Ellen sees Nosferatu in the window across the street, his close-up is jarring. Jump scares weren't really a thing back then, but the impact isn't far off. Sometimes he'll cut to an image that has no direct impact on the plot, like a spider or a Venus flytrap, but in the context of the film, the meaning is clear. It's symbolism by juxtaposition. Even large distances between characters are broken down. We get the feeling that all three of them, the husband, the wife, and the vampire, are linked through time and space. Ellen wakes from her sleep, terrified, as Hutter tries to block out his own fear. Although they're hundreds of miles away from each other, it's as though Nosferatu can hear her when she calls out. Other times, he'll linger on a shot. Unlike Sunrise, the camera barely moves. It remains locked in position as the vampire slowly climbs out of the ship, and we, the audience, can't look away until the film allows us to, just like being stuck in a nightmare. The other reason I think these images have stuck around is the use of the frame itself. Shots feel designed for those specific shots, like individual paintings. See See how the doorway practically molds itself to Max Schreck's body. It's as if the two are pieces of the same puzzle. This was a process Murnau encouraged from his art director. The world came from the characters and their psychology. Instead of drawing up the sets from scratch, they were designed around the actors themselves, extensions of them. The space is as much a character as anyone else. From the beginning of the script stage, Murnau would annotate and note specific shots, locations, or sketch certain frames as they came to mind. It's worth mentioning that the German style of screenwriting at the time was almost poetic. Lines were short and rhythmic, structure and punctuation as important to conveying the mood of a scene as the scene itself. Karl Mayr would sometimes use questions in the scripts to convey how a character might be feeling. That inward focus carried itself through every stage of production, all the way to the finished film. The result is an experience less designed to scare you as it is to get under your skin. Every one of Murnau's movies lives in its own world. Four years after Nosferatu, he made Faust, another adaptation of a famous story. His ability to take established source material and make it his own was proven again. The film is not a literal translation of the page. It's a work of art in its own right. The use of every cinematic property he had at his disposal, costume, effects, editing, is considered and even pushed beyond what had been done before. Nothing was unimportant to Murnau. Light was as much a part of his directing as the actors were. He knew how to position things so that they looked sculpted into the frame. Sometimes the stories themselves might not hold up as well. Faust wasn't a great success at the time because it was considered a highbrow film, and I'd be lying if I said the pacing of it and Nosferatu didn't dip a little around the middle. But the overall impression one has after watching the two is that these were made by a genuine artist. A man who knew what he wanted even if he didn't know how to get it. As stressful or as hectic as it probably was for everyone on set, what an exciting sense of accomplishment it must have been to know you were moving the whole medium forward to a place it had never been. As fun and as important as it is for me to pick apart and admire these moments, it all comes down to the films. One of the things that talking about movies doesn't offer you is the experience of actually watching them. And at the end of the day, that's what they were made for. A lot of Murnau's films are available on YouTube, so if you're ever in the mood for a silent / not really that silent cinema experience, then I clearly recommend you give them a shot. Murnau also had this quote that stuck with me. I think it's very modern and relatable to movie making today. He said, "There should be no such thing as an interesting camera angle. The angle in itself has no significance, and if it does not intensify the dramatic effect of the scene, it can even be harmful." I think that's true. And I think if there's anyone that we can learn that from, it's F.W. Murnau.